Hello travelers, Boardman21 here, and today got the Autobomber 2.0 for you. A lot of people have been asking for an updated Autobomber. Not much has changed with it. The only thing that's a big change is Devouring Orb itself. We went from doing a lot of the abyssal orb damage into instead doing a lot of hit damage with the orb itself. So we changed some points around in the skill tree there. And then we just went as defensive as possible since we lack a lot of DR in the passive tree. So the Void Knight can obviously feel quite squishy. Now with that said, the gameplay that you're watching, we are 400 plus corruption at the moment, still have pretty decent survivability. We have a huge health pool, which is pretty easy to get considering you just stack vitality for damage and for health on the entire build. And then on top of that, some increase in the hybrid is going to really boost you up into that 3000 plus area of health. Now, with this build, it's pretty quick until you get to about 200-300 corruption. At that point it starts to slow down a bit. You don't really become a walking simulator anymore. It starts to take more than 1 to 2 hits to start killing things, and of course, just like before, single target is what's going to take longest. It's a great echo farmer. You can make it through echoes pretty quick. You can shield rush for unlimited straight distances, which is really nice. But against single target, that's where you're going to notice the lack of damage. And while it does decent damage, single target's going to take you a really long time for 2 reasons. One is because we're not fully built into smite damage, which means that without like devotion or something that really scales smite damage to a max, it doesn't hit super hard. And at the other time, the orbs seem to only hit an enemy 1 time, which is really nice that it hits really hard when you're going through echoes and they tend to just wipe out the mobs you walk through. But against single target, it means that you're not getting as many hits. So that's one reason why single target's going to feel a little bit slower. But again, 400 plus corruption, totally viable, and it works. So let's go ahead and get into the build and exactly what puts it all together. For skills, I'm running Smite, Rebuke, Devouring Orb, Anomaly, and Shield Rush. For Smite, we got 3 points in Pillars of Light, 5 points in Sacrifice, 5 points in Atonement, 4 points in Deep Impact, 1 point in Conviction, and then 2 points in Blinding Flash. The reason we don't have more points in Conviction is 1, we want to keep the cast speed as fast as possible, and we have a lot of base crit outside of this with crit chance, so Smite almost has a 100% crit chance as is. However, if you want to have even a higher chance or get to 100% because you don't have a catalyst on or something, feel free to take the points out of Blinding Flash and put them into Conviction. For Rebuke, which we took instead of Sigils of Hope because we're going for full survivability, we have 20 points, 2 of them in Regenerative Shell, 3 in Mystic Aegis, 4 points in Brave the Elements, 4 in Augmented Plating, 1 in Protective Legacy, so we keep the buffs after channeling, so we'll keep the armor, we'll keep the elemental or reduced elemental damage taken, as well as the health regen, which isn't a big deal, and then we also get Burst of Speed, so after Rebuke ends, we get move speed, cast speed, attack speed, we keep the armor, keep the reduced elemental damage, and then we keep it for an extra 60% length of time, which it lasts as long as you were channeling it, which is really nice. Then for Devouring Orb, we made some changes here, mostly taking points out of Chaotic Turret, and then putting most points back into Extinction for that collision damage. So the Abyssal Orbs, which is a spell that gets fired off, which is what we were basing our damage on before, because they reduce the amount of those that are actually being procced, they don't happen nearly as often, we don't have as many orbs, so there's not as many of them coming out. We're instead building into the actual orb collision damage, which is when the orb touches a mob and it hits really hard, so we built into that. So we got 1 point in Void Adept, 1 point in Hollow Orb, 1 point in Abyssal Emission, 1 point in Chaotic Turret, 1 point in Dark Moon, 1 point in Abyssal Rush, 1 point in Distant Satellite, 1 point in Cosmic Impact, and then 5 points in Extinction for that 200% collision damage, so it hits really hard. If you don't have any sort of mana issues, you have tons of cast speed, you can take the 2 points out of Sightless Star and put them into the Chaotic Turret. You still get good damage with the Abyssal Orbs, but again, the orb hit damage is definitely more. And then the last 5 points all into the Rift Core for that Void Pen, which is a 50% more modifier for us for the Rifts, for the Abyssal Orbs, and for the actual collisions, which is really nice. So those 5 points are definitely worth it. Then for Anomaly, this is our buff. We've got 1 point in Void Touch, 1 point in Immediacy, 1 point in Time Bubble, 5 points in Decimation for that 150% increased crit, 5 points in Temporal Mastery, 1 point in Time Lord, so it's cast on us, so it's always following us, 1 point in Manipulation, 2 points in Swift Rest, 2 points in Time Eater, and 1 point in Void Maul. If you have cooldown reduction on your belt or on your boots or somewhere else, you can definitely take the 2 points out of Swift Rest if you're getting 100% uptime of Anomaly already and put that into the Leech. And then for Shield Rush, which is our movement skill to allow us to just go flying through maps, especially in straight lines, you only need 3 points in here, and that would be 2 in Consuming Path and 1 in Dark Rush, so that you don't have to use a shield with it. But we've got 5 points in the Cosmetic Path, 2 more points in Void Breaker, 1 in the Descent of the Void, 1 in Dark Regression, 6 in Rush Mastery, 2 in Protective Speed, and the last 2 in Warrior's Entrance. And again, after the 2 here and 1 here, you can put the rest of the points anywhere that you want. For passives, I've got 2 points in Juggernaut, 8 points in Fearless, 5 points in Armor Clad, and 5 points in Time and Faith, since we are manually casting Smite to get that health and mana back. In the Paladin, we got 8 points, all of them in Defiance to help us with that Elemental Resist. If you get your Elemental Resist on gear and you're fully covered, you can definitely take these 8 points out and put it into Void Knight somewhere else, because those 8 points will give you 8% more Critical Strike multiplier. The last 84 points we have are all in the Void Knight, with 10 points in Abyssal Endurance, 6 points in Temporal Corruption, 6 points in World Eater, 1 point in Void Corruption, 8 points in Void Bolts, 5 points in Renouncement, 5 points in Echoing Strikes, 10 points in Time Legion, 1 point in Avatar of Regret, 15 in Dread, 1 in Essence of the End, 1 in Future Mind, 10 points in Eternal Form, and then 5 points in Void Aegis, which a lot of people will say that this is useless. You're only getting 10% DR for only 100 damage taken, but really any form of DR you can get for the Void Knight is going to help you, because there is such a limited amount of it to get. For the character sheet and the inventory, you can see we're capped on almost all of our resists, just missing a little bit of cold. We've got about 38% DR through armor. We're still trying to stack that. I'd like to get to at least 50% before I say we're really in our final form. That DR will really help, and probably once we get to 50% plus, we'd be able to push towards 500 corruption without dying a ton. We do have about 4,000 health, and again, it's very achievable just because of how much vitality and health we are just stacking on the build in general. And then of course we've capped out the endurance and critical strike avoidance. And then for gear, you can also see there are no uniques required, but there are some you could definitely use, such as if I do find a 2 or 3 or 4 LP Titan Heart, I would probably switch to it if I got the right stats on it, such as vitality and increased health or echo damage whenever a skill echoes. I would definitely switch over to a Titan Heart, switch back to a two-hander, and get that 15% DR through that, because that is a ton of DR, not to mention it comes with 40% increased health, which is nice. You can do Siphons of Anguish, you can do the Ravenous Void Gloves, there's quite a few uniques that you can use, but you have to have LP on them to really beat out an exalted item, and I just haven't had that luck yet. But for the most part, we're just stacking as much critical strike and spell critical strike chance as possible, and then just as much as vitality and health. At the same time, we're also getting as much resistance and capping all of that out. So what's nice about it is, since there are no uniques, you have lots of affixed stats that you can use. It's pretty easy to end up capping out your resist and everything, and getting a high amount of critical strike chance. Again, this isn't the best offhand catalyst. You can actually get up to plus 6% spell critical strike chance, and if I had that, we would have a much closer to 100% crit chance with this build in general, but just haven't found a good enough one to use yet. But I will have all that in the build planner to really show you the final form versus what I have now. And then for idols, stack your vitality, get your resistance. The other thing you can do is the increased echo damage when a skill echoes is also very nice. It's really going to boost the damage of the echo skills that go. It's not an increase that's added to your increase, it's almost a straight multiplier for echoed skills. So if you get 2 or 300% echo damage, you're going to notice that your echoes are doing 2 to 3 times as much damage as your normal hits, which is really, really nice. And then for how to play this build, which it's really simple, I like to put Anomaly and Devouring Orb both on autocast, which if you're looking for that, there is a video on YouTube. Just search autocast last epoch, it'll pop right up. You're just keybinding the numlock keypad, and then that'll keep your Devouring Orbs coming out. Your Anomaly will be up all the time. After that, you can Shield Rush in a straight line for as far as you want. Whenever you take huge damage, you can Rebuke and get a nice shield with a massive amount of DR. And then, of course, you just smite your targets, and that's all that's needed. And as you can see here, which we're not getting kills. You get Void Rifts when enemies actually die, which do a nice AoE, kind of like what happens when the orbs are actually ending their duration right now. You get that little rift. And then, of course, your Devouring Orbs, when you have them come in and actually hit in these areas, you can see that they are hitting really, really hard. The Echo ones are going to be hitting the hardest. And if I get an Echo one here, you can see that it's going to hit much harder than this 50k. It should happen, hopefully, here any second. The nice one's going to be that we have to get a crit with it. I can't see all the numbers. They're moving too fast. There we go, 90k. So you can see with the 100% echo damage that instead of doing the normal 40 to 50k damage, our Devouring Orb, that echo would hit for 100k damage. So you can see how getting some echo damage, that straight multiplier, definitely helps the build feel a little better as well. But that'll be it. I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys with some gameplay. Let me know in the comments below if you're still enjoying the Autobomber. It's been around a long time. It's seen some nerfs, and hopefully, you know, with this change to it, it can be pushed again well into the end game for a lot of people.